welcome back to Reality with Reality Hub, and it's another time here at the lovely Browne St Cafe in 50 Rosebank Road, Avondale. And it's starting to be kind of a bit of a local for us to record in here. A few people wonder what we're doing with all the equipment sitting in the corner table. But if you ever come down, you might catch us on a Sunday or a weekend and come and enjoy the show. Meanwhile, Rob, it's been a little while since we caught up, and you've got a massive list of things to discuss. So I'm keen to hear all about it.
Yeah, hey guys, how's it all going? Really good to be back here at Browne St. What I love is the staff here are so welcoming and friendly. So when we came in, they immediately recognized us, and I love that they're so friendly here. So yeah, if you are in the area, definitely check out Browne St Cafe in Avondale. Now, I don't know about a massive list, but I do know that it's been a little bit in between our recordings. So what happens is you have time to reflect and contemplate on things, and I've kind of just been reflecting on, and this is putting it out there to you guys listening to this, is how has your reality altered or changed during the course of the events so far that we've experienced? Because there's been a lot of upheaval and turmoil, and I've encountered people and had face-to-face conversations, and there are people that are struggling and there are people that are not struggling. So what camp are you in? Have you asked yourself that? And I'm kind of looking, because in New Zealand there was a period there where we had successfully conquered the C word.
That's right. We had conquered it. No one was saying it. No, of course, we were talking about it all the time, and we were remarking on how lucky we were to not be a different country that appeared to be suffering terribly from it.
What was it? It was like 20-odd days where we were COVID-free.
Yeah, like I'm not keeping a close tab on the exact number, but it was 20-something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then a couple of ladies flew into the country for a funeral or for visiting someone who wasn't well. And again, I'm not exactly pedantic on those details, but what we all know affected us was they were let out of their solitary confinement without a process occurring that was supposed to have guaranteed they were clear before they travelled. And so they got their test done but then took off, were given the option to leave on compassionate grounds, and then they found themselves getting a result further down some time later, as they had already travelled through the country and run into people and used bathrooms and shook hands and hugged people. Because
it created quite a bit of a stir in the public collective consciousness of, hey, what the hell's going on here? I thought our borders were secure. I thought we were
totally
fine.
Lost their nut, didn't they?
Yeah.
It was almost funny to see people lose it on talkback and have such heated responses. And of course, people feel invested. And if you buy into the COVID reality as it's fed to us through the mainstream mass media, you would feel absolutely let down, wouldn't you?
And that brings up a big thing of how much of the media, the impact, how much does that have an impact on your day-to-day life? And we talk about that all the time. And how does that impact your reality, and how do you manage that? And so, for example, when you, as I think saying before, when you come face-to-face with people, you kind of gauge where they're at, but they immediately, in my experience, they start talking about the immediate environment and what's happening in the media and in their life and how that's been impacted. So I think it has quite a huge impact, because it kind of infiltrates your thought processes, and you go, hang on a minute, we're still in the middle of this kind of global pandemic. And I was listening to the guys from Nah What, big shout out to those guys, just to check in to see what's happening over in Oz. And apparently in Victoria, they've gone back to the whole social distancing and limiting groups in public settings.
They've increased restrictions again.
Yeah, because remember they only did the level 3 kind of restrictions. We went to 4, but they still haven't opened their borders over in Victoria.
Right.
And now they're looking at maybe middle of July, from what I gather. So it's kind of, because remember we were thinking that hopefully there would be an opening up of the borders.
A bubble.
A trans-Tasman bubble, yeah.
Yeah, we all got excited about it.
Yeah, and the feedback I've got from what I've been talking about is it's kind of, we were celebrating the success that we had we're COVID free, and now it's sort of infiltrated back again, and it could be another spike, and it's like, oh, we're in that uncertain phase again. Can we really move forward and sort of really open up again? Yeah.
So,
What are your thoughts on that? Do you think there's going to be another big wave?
well, my thoughts are, I take a bit of a grain of salt with this because I think so much that's reported isn't
Necessarily true?
Yeah, there's so many inconsistencies, and I don't want to publicly say it on the podcast that I think it's all bullshit, but at times I think there are some exaggerations and inconsistencies, and there are things that counting as when people count certain numbers as an infection, and yet. Oh man, there's so many things. We know someone overseas who recently was exposed to someone with COVID-19, lived in the same home as them, breathed the same air, walked past them frequently. They were part of their bubble, and they did not catch the illness according to the antibody test that they went through. We know that they're now sort of saying that if you're asymptomatic, that's just as meaning showing no symptoms. That's just as bad as being symptomatic, and yet it's really confusing.
It's so confusing.
The mask laws are always changing. There's so many inconsistencies, and so whether or not you think I've gone too far down the conspiracy portal by saying things like this, or by holding beliefs that question the reality of it. But that's what this is all about. Our podcast is questioning the reality of things.
Yeah.
You would have to acknowledge, even if you were straight up and down, taking the narrow path of everything that I hear is real, you would have to acknowledge that there were incredible amounts of inconsistencies. Why tell people that masks weren't important, and then overseas, we're hearing reports of people complaining that you told us masks weren't important, now you're telling us they are. And yet there's no actual additional information occurring scientifically to support one thing more than another.
Yeah.
There's just so much. And I know we've kind of dwelled on these things in the past. What do I think? I think your first question, has your worldview or reality shifted since the pandemic? Yeah, it has, because of something more important than all of that. And more important than all of that is, I'm going to answer as though, I'm going to answer for me and in my life and for the people that are important to me. I can tell you I've thought long and hard about where I'm at, the work I do, where I want to live, what I want to do more of in the future. And yeah, no, I really think that that time period has given me real pause for thought, and I've totally shifted gear in the kinds of things I'm doing, paying attention to, and investing energy into. Because like a lot of people who might have, for example, and I think this is a relevant analogy, if you had a job that you hated, but you did it day after day after day because by the time you got home at 7 p.m. it was sort of dinner time and bedtime, and you were caught up in the next day's activities to stay afloat, to keep going, to stay on top of your role, you virtually never have time to reflect. And the COVID-19 time frame was essentially an enforced period of detention to give you time to reflect on your life. And that's a positive thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. It was a period of time that was enforced on us for a particular reason, for the benefit of saving lives and spreading a disease that we knew nothing much about.
Yeah.
It became so sudden. So yeah, forced whatever situation you were in, it forced you to have a look at it, and in some cases, if things weren't quite great in your world, you needed to sort of have a good look at the good things and the bad things, and China. That's if you're that way inclined as well. If you're that sort of person that can reflect and take a real good look at your life, and you want to think, well, what's the priority? What's important to me now? I used to think my life was all running smoothly, and then suddenly I'm forced to stop and have a real good close look at it. That's if these things came up for you.
I think for a lot of people, who they lived with, the relationship they were in, all came under scrutiny.
Yeah.
A lot of people that are in a relationship don't necessarily live with their partner full-time over a month. And even that 1 month period was enough for a lot of people to engage lawyers at the end of that time period to look at divorce proceedings or...
I wonder what the figures are, what the numbers are.
Examine toxic relationships that were just too exaggerated, that could not be ignored in that time period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it sort of brings to mind, what has changed on your own personal level, your own personal circumstances.
Yeah.
And what has changed on a collective level, because the two things, things are happening in the collective that affect things in your personal world. So if you had a job where you had to travel, on a collective level, that all shut down. If you traveled overseas or even traveled in your country, during that whole period, that would have affected you on that level. So as an example. But on a collective level, it's interesting how people's perceptions may have changed. Maybe people are more aware of what's happening on a world scale. Maybe people are more aware of what information they're letting into their consciousness from the media. I think that's sort of shifted a lot.
Yeah.
Who can you believe? Who can we trust? I think I mentioned somewhere in there, are the systems being dismantled or need to sort of be changed on some level? Like we saw those riots over in America that just flared up as well. Was that something that was really in the collective consciousness and that just needed a trigger or something to instigate what was already there, or was it planned on some level?
Yeah, right.
I mean, these are the questions you sort of start to reflect on. Given those recent events in the world, and then you just go, wow, or like,
well, the Black Lives Matter thing has really had a remarkable effect on people. And if you're paying attention to the news or you listen to podcasts yourself, like we listen to podcasts too. We make one and we listen to one. And the things that I listen to are very much concerned with those two topics, with the pandemic and with the Black Lives Matters protests. You see really interesting things come out about, I don't know, I heard a term for the first time about white fragility.
Oh, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, no, it's about the responses that white people give you when you bring up the issue of racism. I was listening to the Quote of the Day podcast, which I've mentioned in the past. Great podcast. And it had someone talking about all the different responses that people have and how everyone has an opinion. And it's really it's been interesting, and to hear these points of view, and I'm just kind of taking it all in, just kind of thinking it through, and for myself reassessing the way that I communicate about topics and examining my reality. 'Cause, it'd be pretty shit if I was on a podcast talking about your reality and I didn't think long and hard about my own.
Exactly.
But I do, and I had a recent thing come up with a friend where we were talking on that topic, and I realized in that conversation that one of the ways that I approached a topic about cultural realities in New Zealand and the way certain groups behave, I realized was just some old programming. And I went, no, I need to rethink that through, because it's the way that people are bringing this topic to the fore is really all about not generalizing about groups of people at all. And so...
Well, no, wasn't it specifically that Black Lives Matter? I mean, I think there was this whole thing of, we know that all lives matter, but for now it's kind of, we're specifically focusing on this issue right here. So...
Yeah, but what it brings up for me, and so certainly the sentiment of Black Lives Matter is something I'm fine with, Yeah, totally. Of course it matters, because it does. But what it brings up for me is the wider issue of the way in our lives we discuss or bring up topics around making generalizations or stereotypes about people. So you might sort of, for example, say, well, Asian people are really great at math.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so you can say that, and in this point in time, in this day and age,
This wouldn't be a good thing to say. Yeah.
Well, it's also not really such a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because it's a compliment.
Yeah. I mean,
Because the truth is, if you, and the reason but it's also possibly an observable statistic. It may be.
I was just going to say
generally
that
speaking,
could be
Asian people are great at math.
immeasurable,
Yeah.
and the statistics are out there saying, and you're just stating a fact.
Yeah, and then if you look at that openly and honestly, that may actually be because of a reason, which is that culturally the families that raise Asian children
and the
place
schooling system and the
high,
jobs that are available, etc., etc.
No. That culturally the families that raise Asian children, Asians themselves, place a high emphasis on homework and school, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that might be the reason why that is. But to say it is that's an easy one. That's not really picking on anyone because it's complimentary. But then if you say, but if you say some other group is, I don't know, you might talk about how a certain group in society is more involved. Ultimately, they have a higher population in prisons.
Right.
Well, statistically that may be true.
Yeah.
But it's really how you interpret that perhaps statistical fact into your life starts to become something that shows whether you have a bias in one way or another towards a group of people.
Sure.
And so this whole topic, for me, has not impinged, that's not the right word, has affected me in a way that has made me re-examine and exactly how I think certain topics through. And I'm trying to do my best to take each thought that comes in that direction for its own merits rather than to go, well, this group of people has a high incidence of diabetes, for example, because they might, because geographically, demographically, or statistically, certain people might. But you just got to go, well, in this day and age, you can't say things like that, even though it might be a truth. You've got to be very careful because people are sensitive around that kind of thing, because we're all really like, that could be racist, even though it might actually just be a health department statistic.
Yeah, and the thing is, you may not be inferring, is that the right word, that, you know, you use the Asian example of good at math or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You may not be inferring anything to do with, from a racial point of view, you're just merely stating a fact. Because you might have read it on some report, or it was a news article and go, oh yeah, or you might have that might have been your experience going through higher education or whatever, and that seemed to be the trend.
Yeah.
But for me, before this whole, BLM even came to the fore, I guess it kind of, you start to look at your own views and on race, and it sort of shines a spotlight on it, and you go, am I racist? Is this the way I think? And I think that's what you were talking about. You're re-examining your own programming and thought processes and going, am I like that? Yeah, so I think in one way it kind of made you think about it.
I said to myself, well, I'm definitely not racist, but the way I expressed something in that conversation, which will be a private conversation I had between a friend of mine and I, made me go, the way I said that, which was not maliciously intended, may have come across in a way that exposes some old belief, and I had to go, no, I really need to not think in those terms.
Yeah.
And that's like meditation, where you return to your focus, in the sense that you re-examine that you've just sort of gone off track a bit. In the way that you think, it's important to go, oh, hang on, return to and re-examine the way I think repeatedly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because everyone wants to just be the best version of themselves.
Do they?
I'd like to progress in some way in this lifetime.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Yeah. I mean, if it comes down to the individual when you say being the best version of yourself. I mean, I like to think as a human being, you're always trying to evolve and grow, and that's just a course of your journey. But I think you're either facilitating that and you're open to that, or life is sort of giving you the hurry up and you're getting all these challenges, so you're forced to. So, the whole thing where you're going through a really tough time or traumatic situation, it forces you to reevaluate your life, and you either, it provides the environment for you to awake and become more aware and go, hang on a minute. So, that's an interesting one. But, it's funny, this whole programming and cultural programming, and if you can just take a step back and how influenced you are, and how we've said this before on our show, from the moment you enter this reality, you're being programmed from your parents and their beliefs and values.
Yeah.
And then you're being programmed by the media because you're watching TV. And you know, when we were growing up, it was just TV. And now it's just social media and trends, and then it has such a huge impact and grip on you that you're in that soup all the time. I think obviously you go through the schooling system and you're taught all these facts and figures and stuff. And then it's like, well, and then, you know, we're on this path of sort of questioning all that and reevaluating that, and you know, is this programming serving a higher purpose, or is it not? Is it allowing us to evolve into the species we want to be, or is it actually, is there something deeper at hand that's kind of sabotaging that, and there are these evil forces out there that are sort of manipulating and controlling our reality, and we don't even know it until we wake up from it and we go, hang on a minute. I don't know.
Speaking of controlling your reality, you don't even know it. I mean, it brings up that topic of people who run businesses can work as hard as they like, and then something like this rolls in, and through no fault of their own, their whole world has changed with the pandemic.
Yeah.
And you know, it can affect people of all kinds of socioeconomic status. Change can occur.
Exactly.
And you wouldn't necessarily have thought to prepare for a month off work. Perhaps at the busiest time of your season if you're a tourism operator, and it was, you know, like pre-winter, best time for scuba diving or something, whatever business you're in, and suddenly you don't have anyone coming through. That's really tough, and it's tough on the whole world, obviously, but that makes you think, how exposed or weak is my business if this happens again?
True, yeah. And as we always say, everything is so interconnected, so, you know, what's happening, and it's a bit like your body. You know, if something's wrong in one aspect of your body, it's going to affect another part of your body, and it's the same with with the world. You know, what's happening in one country or one part of the world is going to affect another part of the world. And you may think, well, I don't travel and I don't do all this, you know, like I'm not a tourist, but the tourist dollar and the economic impact, you know, you can do, I'm not an expert on it, but I can definitely see that there's a roll-on effect, and for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. So I'm just wondering how, you know, in the next few months, or how things are going to track from now. Because at the moment, you know, I've been going to cafes and the gym and the like, and they're not up to speed yet. They're actually not. I talk to the owners or the people that work there, and it's kind of still not, you know, maybe it's just too early. Maybe things are just still too uncertain in the environment.
You said you were talking to a nice fella who owns a business near the gym.
Yeah. He's got a chain of stores, and he was just saying how he's got to close maybe out of the 29 of them, maybe 3/4 of them.
Good Lord.
He's got them in this country and also overseas, and he was just angry at the government, angry at the small business owners that suffered through that. And I could see,
because he was forced to close, right?
He was forced to close, and just basically it impacted his business that he may not recover from it. Hence the closing of stores, etc., etc. And he's been in business, you know, since the early 2000s. And
if I recall, because he was actually really annoyed that he wasn't considered an essential service.
This is true, yeah.
You know, it doesn't really matter what he does, I guess, unless you want to say, because it's your
Well, he was
story.
in the health and fitness industry, and he was providing.
But my point is, a lot of people would feel annoyed that they weren't considered an essential service.
Yeah, well, I brought up the whole topic of what was considered essential. I remember when we could order stuff online, and there were like things that were crossed off, and other things, and I thought, what makes one thing better than the other? They're going to be shipped the same way, handled the same way. I'm paying my money, but you're telling me that this thing is
non-essential,
and yet, who made that call?
And who beer and alcohol at the liquor store is essential. You know, Alcoholics Anonymous meetings are not.
the list goes on. And I remember when, at the start of the level 4 lockdown, I think the Warehouse, which is a big chain here that sells a whole bunch of amazing household goods,
That's right.
were originally okay and to open, and then they couldn't. And I just couldn't figure out why. When
Well, I remember them saying that they were going to be open,
they were,
but
they
then
didn't.
they found out that they weren't allowed to either.
Yeah, they weren't allowed, and I wonder what the criteria was. And it just, it's a tough one. It's a tough one from the perspective of the people that have really been impacted from it, and they've now, So
Yeah, if you had a business, I guess in his instance, the health and fitness meant that he sold topics that people consumed and ate and drank, among other things.
Well, the funny thing is, I knew other businesses that were in the same line, and they were open. They were still shipping stuff out during the whole process. Because remember, the couriers were
yeah, right, because there's different sides of health and fitness, right?
Well, I guess so.
I mean,
yeah, but this
you've
was
got equipment. You've got different things that can be sold in that business.
Yeah.
I mean, because exercycles and so forth, we did great business.
Well, I was just saying, you'd
know.
think anything to promote health and wellness would be considered essential.
Anything.
Yeah. Where was all the
alternative health stores were shut down too?
All
I
those,
guess that doesn't fit the preconceived mainstream belief system.
Where's all the education on that?
Yeah. Where's the what vitamins should I be taking? What's the education on the right approach to health and well-being, body weight, all that sort of stuff? It's just not there.
Yeah, taking ownership of your body, and learning about your immune system and all these other things, which are going to benefit you through your whole life, not just now. But this is just standard good practice. And where did I read something recently? Well, I mean, I'll tell you a quick little story.
Yeah, go on.
My mother goes to the hospital quite a lot for various conditions, and she was told she's been taking, I think, don't quote me, it actually doesn't matter what it was, but high blood pressure pills. Let's just say it was that.
Okay, yeah. There's many different kinds.
There's many different kinds,
Sure.
but the point of the story is the actual doctor, a female doctor, said, "What, you're taking those? Don't you know the poison?" That's what she said.
Really?
Yeah, and this is coming straight from the doctor's mouth. And my mother was just shocked.
She
Well,
was
not
like,
shocked
of
because
course I don't know their poison.
Yeah.
One of your colleagues prescribed them for me.
and I've been trying. Well, I mean, you know me. I like to take the introspective route. I believe my body can
Do a very good job.
heal itself. That it has everything within its capability, and I'll always take a natural approach to it. But that coming from a doctor in a hospital saying that it's poison, what you're basically taking.
I kind of dig that.
Yeah, I mean, but for my mum, it was kind of shocking, but not shocking because she's kind of aware of that. But to actually hear it and not in person, it kind of
you'd have to say
struck home. It's
that
like saying,
doctor
hang
was
on
brave.
a minute. Yeah, and I thought, wow, and I said to her, wow, I mean, that she's being honest about that, and she's telling you that.
Well, what's the rest of the story? What did the doctor then suggest she do instead?
I don't know. I think my mum was not going to wasn't taking them anyway. But it was just the whole point that what are you really ingesting and why is this really going to help you? And from my point of view, it masks. It's kind of, it doesn't heal what's really wrong with you. It just masks the symptoms.
Well, it's a symptomatic
you.
treatment. Yeah. It's certainly often these things aren't resolving the cause of the issue.
Yeah, and I'm always from the point of view of to heal it completely and to bring that up into the surface, whatever ailment it is, and to actually to treat the actual cause, to get to the root of the matter and not cover it up, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I mean,
but that's your approach to health and well-being, and that's a good approach. I mean,
that's my approach.
I just spent a weekend with people who are in deep with the health and alternative health industry. Yeah, and it was fascinating spending time with them. Had a great time, and we spent most of the weekend talking about alternative health and supplements and the latest research on things. And it's so good to know that we're in a country where people have the freedom to talk that way. And
Yeah.
Long may that last. Because there are lots of people out there who don't buy what's been presented to them in the mainstream media about the reality of this pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah, and then this whole thing about, well, the reason why it's still out there is because we don't have a cure and we don't have a vaccine.
Yeah.
So until that happens, then we can't fully get back to sort of a normal life, and you know, we need everyone vaccinated. And do we want to go down that rabbit hole?
I don't know that I do, really.
But I mean, that was just my thought. I'm just thinking, well, is that the real, not the end game, because I don't think it's an end game, but it's the sort of the logical next step that still must be on everyone's thoughts.
Yeah, well, for a lot of people who think that that's the only answer, then that's all they can see.
Yeah.
So, you know, fine. If that's something that you want to do, go get your vaccine. Not for me, though. Not for me. I'd rather be healthy and fit in a different way.
Yeah. Exactly.
Indeed. That seems to be what's going on behind the scenes, is that agenda to push that through. There's certain powerful forces that seem to want that up and running as soon as possible. But like I've always said, any vaccine that takes less than 18 months is not clearly tested very well.
Yeah.
And given the time it needs to prove itself, and that's if you buy into the vaccine approach and paradigm.
Yeah, exactly. Gee, it's such a confusing and complicated topic. I find myself just going around in circles sometimes and just sort of not getting any clarity on it, other than the fact that you've got to reality manage your own life and your own well-being, and then as I was saying, you know, your own personal life and the things you can and can't control, and then whatever's happening in the collective or in the outward reality is just going to play out. And but yeah, it's a strange time.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
I noticed you put down one of our topics to talk about is the world's operating systems being dismantled. Well, do you want to unpack that a bit?
Yeah, well, just the whole what I mean by that is your day-to-day reality, and operating systems are the things that you do from that impact your day-to-day world, whether it's your technology, you know, the smartphone you carry, whether it's the computer you use for work, the systems that govern society, so governmental systems, all the systems that the matrix, basically.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we're plugged into it, and are they being dismantled? Are they being reviewed? Are we going into? Well, we already are in a very technological world, but you know, well, how's that going to advance? Yeah,
well, I think there's been a loss of freedoms in some ways. Certainly, we can't travel the world. We can't.
Yeah, those are another system. Yeah,
do things within that system or within those opportunities. It's harder and harder to pay by cash for things.
Exactly.
Should you have wanted to pay by cash, they are finding a way of basically saying because it's a long time been said that there's a push towards a cashless society by world government type groups. Well, here's just a great example of how that can be achieved. And people say we won't accept cash because it could be dirty, dangerous, covered in disease.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's another sort of freedom lost if you wanted to not always have everything you did tracked by a computer system, because every payment was trackable.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge system right there.
Yeah, the financial system.
The financial system, yeah.
Indeed. And then you've got the travelling system and the business system that I mentioned, and just the freedoms to come and go as you please are totally scrutinised, covered and squashed now in ways that weren't before. And I half expect the technical world that we're going into to give us a sense of freedom from because of and thanks to technology, but in fact at the moment we're going through a compression, a reduction in freedoms, and that in itself is interesting. So I wonder when that'll open again. because people will at one point just get sick of that continued sense of being imprisoned by the current example. There's only so far people can go before they push back and go, enough, I'm not taking this anymore.
Right.
And they're getting closer and closer. And the more they push it, the quicker they do it, the more that pushback will happen. So, they have to do it very, very slowly or the pushback will be profound. And that's just ordinary people saying, I've had enough of this shit. And you might be surprised at the election for New Zealand, I think in September. Jacinda Ardern's doing very, very well and always has in the Labour government. But if these things are pushed too hard, she'll just be voted out. And even though she's a very, very popular Prime Minister.
Right.
And I think, and in some ways I think she's great too, but if things, if the countrywide sentiment in New Zealand is one of frustration,
right,
people will vote the other direction.
Yeah.
Every political party knows that, and it's nothing personal.
Really good point, because I know that she's had, let's just say, been riding a bit of a wave after wave of popularity and seeming to be doing no wrong. But, what goes up must come down. And so at some point, I believe there'll be some sort of swing going the other way. I mean, that's just the natural course of things in general. So that's what I'm predicting. I mean, at some point, Well, my politics is very much left of centre, which is what Jacinda's party represents. But it doesn't make me necessarily not see the reality that she could lose. Why not?
Because just because my politics are left of centre, which for me means is a kind of centre-left positioning that is still capitalist, but is caring enough to support people with social programs like payments of the dole or whatever. And not totally right wing, and you're all out on your own. That doesn't appeal to me. I think Team New Zealand needs to care for each other, and so that's why my politics sit centre left. But it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if she was voted out because people are sick of the kinds of things we've given up during this time period. Arguably, we've done very well, and from the position we're in, we can say, "Oh, look at us! Aren't we doing great?" And that does not mean, or nor should it be, code for shut up and don't examine what we did. And people will examine how things went, and people will look at the nature of businesses and mistakes that were made and how we could have approached this all differently, and they'll vote centre-right, which is the National Party. And centre-right's really not that different from centre-left. And some would argue it's all got the same puppet masters anyway.
You had to throw that in there.
You have to, don't you? If you're an independent thinker.
Yeah. Well, you know me, I'm highly up to speed with the political.
Apolitical. I can't remember. You're just not that into it. Yeah.
No, I mean, obviously, I talk to people and they have interest in it, and I've become a little more interested in because it's one of the systems which governs or has an impact on our existence. On our existence. So so it's difficult to just not be aware of it. But it's just there's all these theories and people have got their own political points of views, and once again it all comes down. I mean, I always think to myself, this is just me, I always think it's rigged, the whole system. That whatever government's supposed to get in will just get in. And, it's just me.
Well, can I ask you then, if we're looking at it from that perspective, which is a greater over-control from our great beloved overlords, nameless and unseen, can I ask you then, do you have any information on who's been travelling to the country recently? Here we are in a global lockdown, but who have you heard has gotten in, crossed our borders that we should know about, that hasn't been reported?
I believe he's currently the richest man in the world, and he got even richer during the whole lockdown period because he's the owner of Amazon. But his jet was spotted in Wellington last week, and I also spoke to a person who confirmed that he was in the country.
Right.
For what reason? Well, probably to set up Amazon or to make more money, to get New Zealand on board. And I also heard a rumour that Mr. Bill Gates was in the country at some point as well. And
so we've got Gates of the infamous Gates Foundation.
Yeah, yeah.
Bezos,
And I mean,
Jeff Bezos of Amazon.
that's right,
Yeah.
Jeff Bezos. So, I mean, look, I just pick up on things, and I don't go sort of hunting and do a lot of research with this, but I try and put
you don't have to.
You don't,
New
but you
Zealand's
don't, yeah.
a small country. We can hear from people we know.
And I've also, seen various videos and reports of. I remember I just saw one recently, actually, where Bill Gates was talking about the whole vaccination process and how New Zealand and Australia and Taiwan did really well. Yeah, he mentioned New Zealand, but they basically do want to push that whole agenda and make it as accessible and have these systems in place so that everyone can be vaccinated. But what was scary was he said something about the second wave.
Wave.
Yeah, that will make it work better next time in terms of having that all up in place. Yeah, so I mean, it's just you just pick it and you just go, is there a truth to this kind of conspiracy theory of the people that are in the elite, that are tied to all these corporations, that have the influence, the control, etc., and and for what end and for what reason, and then you tie in the whole New Zealand, and then you go, well, how's that connected on that sort of level?
Well, I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think we're going to be used as an example to point to the rest of the world and say, look what we should have done, because that's how New Zealand did it. And I don't want to be part of that.
It feels like, from what I've heard, particularly like over in Australia and around the world, that we're kind of, because we basically bet it, or have, we
nearly did.
Yeah, we were COVID free. That, wow, see, that's the way you should do it. But how did we do it? By completely shutting everything down, taking away our freedoms.
If you don't trust the mainstream media, then you shouldn't, nor should you therefore trust the good things they say.
Yeah.
And so some of the good things they say, a real case study in Jacinda Ardern mania would have to be, here's this pretty young politician, this great-looking young politician, and kudos to her, she's a great-looking human being, who has become and won the populist vote in the most recent election. And she represents everything that is represented by and large by left-wing politics as is known as the Democratic Party in the US. So then you can take one country like New Zealand and consider it representative of the values of one particular large world power, the Democratic Party of the US, and say that's what she represents and how great our country could be if we were like that.
Right.
Female prime minister, tick that box.
Yeah.
Supports inclusiveness, ticks that box.
Yeah.
Is the opposite of the right wing monster as represented by Donald Trump. What a good person. Oh, she had a tragedy and she banned guns after the Christchurch mosque shooting. And there was so much mystery around that as well, which we could go into in terms of things that have not been fully disclosed. But what a great example she made then. What a wonderful human being, known internationally. Now what have they done? Well, the great Jacinda has now locked everything down way longer than even what was being recommended for her to do. But they beat it. They beat it good. We need to be like Jacinda. So I've said it before on the podcast, and I think I've unpacked it a bit better today, but we will be used as an example for the rest of the world to follow suit and do as they're told. And if you're listening, rest of the world, don't. Do what you want to do. Don't do what we've done. Don't just do what we've done because you're told you have to. Do what works for you and for your people and what makes sense.
So do you feel, I'm going to put this out there, do you feel Jacinda is being, what's the right word, guided and
manipulated, controlled,
all those
puppeteered, totally
from
totally,
because that's what I've picked up on just talking to other people. And I go, well, okay, so I have this saying, and it's a well-known saying that things aren't always as they seem. So
that's how I feel.
Yeah. So on the surface, one thing might appear that way, and it can appear very convincing, but when you do a bit more deeper kind of
Deep
dive, and look beyond the surface, you see some other stuff. So yeah, on the surface, someone can look like they are one thing, but really there's something else going on, and there's something.
Well, look,
more.
Let's join the dots for a second. She's getting huge international positive exposure. She
it seems like it's being it's easy, like it's orchestrated. It's like the doors are being opened and the platforms and everything's sort of there. It's like, oh, wow, how did you become so successful? Look, I mean, if you just as a little analogy, you can look at the Hollywood system and when you dive deeper into certain people's success, you realize why they got success was because of their connections, who they knew.
Of course.
So yes, you think they were talented and they were a great actor and they went to many No, actually it's because they were connected to the right people, the studio bosses, the directors, call it what you will, the in crowd, you're connected. So the doors are going to be open. And then when you and use that as an analogy is because she's connected to the right people.
Yeah,
she's been given these opportunities and being given this image that's been created.
Yeah, and I don't begrudge the success that she's had. Actually, I mean, I'm happy for her. I don't think anyone would or should, and I really dislike the tall poppy syndrome that New Zealand often gets into. So it's not coming from that perspective. It's just coming from the perspective, personally, of just being suspicious of the remarkable, seemingly worldwide response that our particular tiny little country in the South Pacific that normally never gets attention has suddenly had a focus on it, while at the same time, massively wealthy people are flying in from parts of the world where they have.
And I believe they've always been
they have tremendous amounts of money, and they're coming here, and you sort of go, "Oh Jesus, what's about to happen in the world? We might be the lucky ones to be in this country, but my gosh, what does this mean in terms of some sort of impending plan elsewhere?
Yeah.
What do these wealthy people think is about to break down overseas? Is there a setup going on for massive civil war in the US? Is there huge destruction and horrendous things coming? I hope not. But you can bet that, our Prime Minister that has done so well and had such a huge amount of unprecedented global attention, any more than any other country, which is so strange, would suddenly have Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates in the country and not know about it. I bet she does.
Oh, yeah. And I mean...
Can we confirm that actually happened? Do you know that that's...
I can't confirm exactly. It's just what I've heard,
That they were in recently, as in the last 7 days?
Yeah, recently. I mean, who knows? I mean, I do know this much, that people of that stature and nature, whether they be powerful people in whatever industry they're in or business, movie stars, they do frequently come in here under the radar because they can. Yeah. It's that simple. And it might be for legitimate reasons, because they're on holiday or they're whatever. They're, you got to remember that, they have private jets and there are ways around the normal ways of doing things.
That if Bill or Jeff Bezos comes into the country, they're probably just staying in the local Hyatt hotel for 2 weeks on the New Zealand government, getting their 3 meals a day and going out on walking bus tours.
Oh, you mean they're under quarantine?
Under quarantine, right? They'd be under the 2-week quarantine,
of course.
Wouldn't they?
Yes.
But then hang on, wouldn't we have heard from other members in that quarantine group that Bill's there with them and they'd have taken a few photos for Facebook?
Yeah, they'll be wearing the masks. They'll be doing
masks,
yes,
just keeping to themselves.
Yeah,
we wouldn't know about it.
We wouldn't know about it.
No, because
nothing to see. Nothing to see here. Carry on. Carry on. Nothing to see.
Unlikely. They'd be in the presidential suite if they were even bothering with quarantine. If they even had to be subjected to it. Yeah.
But it does make you wonder.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah.
So, media and the impact on our life. I have to say it's been great. I think the media has a lot to be responsible for when it comes to the general stress in the country about certain things going on.
Do you mean on, like I've mentioned on your on your well-being.
Yeah, absolutely.
like
on your
on
well-being.
your- on
but
your-
on a level in which we're not even necessarily conscious of.
Yes.
On a sort of an underlying stress. I remember remarking with Bridget during the lockdown how, and I had started paying a lot of attention to the way video was edited, and I noticed there was this almost subconscious thing that they were doing during level 4 lockdown when they were playing the news reports.
Oh.
And it was fascinating. They would have a filter placed over the footage that was being shown of people getting tests or of landscapes of empty area of New Zealand or of any of the footage that was used. The filter had this sort of these particles filtering through the air. Almost, I didn't mean to use the word filter twice.
You're kidding, right?
But so in things like Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere, you can get these plugins to have sort of transition sequences and filters that give a quality to the image, the video image. And one of the ones they chose to use was where there were visible particles in the air between us. And it was always constantly that sort of subconscious message of the virus is around. The virus is here. And
Are you kidding me?
No,
it
I'm
wasn't
not.
just your TV.
No. I watched it both on our TV and on another device.
Yeah.
And I stopped it, and we both went, "Look at that!" Look at that. And it was just one person interviewing another person, and the filter was used again. And it was like, for those who were not initiated to the subconscious effect of the way things are edited.
Yeah.
You would start to get that underlying stress of shit. There's virus everywhere because you're seeing it on the screen. And it annoyed me because some video editor who works for 3 News or TVNZ News was putting that filter in.
Right.
They knew what they were doing,
Yeah.
and it wasn't even relevant to the story. It was just, this is the lockdown, and everything has the filter of the dust particles, which represents sneezing particles, which represents virus in the air, something to breathe in and
I got that
catch.
straight away when you were just describing it. But I mean, if that's legit, if that thing, that just completely confirms how media is manipulating something to an end.
It was so subtle.
Yeah. That it's subtle.
And it was things like, today, Mary Jane of Howick stood in line at her supermarket for an hour and a half wearing her homemade hazmat suit with mask and goggles on. Yes, I was in the line waiting at the local Howick Countdown supermarket. Did take an hour and a half. That's right, Jackie.
Were you maintaining your 1.5?
I managed to get my 3 packets of toilet paper and the latest newspaper and I got all my essentials. And and it's just a video of someone talking about their experience that day as they waited, but the filter is on them.
Yeah.
The particles are sort of,
It brings to mind, what George Kavassilis has always said: trauma-based mind control.
Absolute George. Thank you, George.
And it's funny because I watched a recent clip with David Icke and Brian Rose. Shout out to London Real TV.
Oh yeah.
And they were talking about mind control, but really getting into the deep.
Was that the Rose Ike 4?
Yeah, which I haven't fully watched because I need to be in the right headspace.
Yeah.
For that one, I've watched all the other ones. But yeah, it was fascinating how that works and how it all plays on your fear. And because we've all had David Icke went into the real hard, like CIA version of how they've done it in the past, like MK Ultra and that sort of stuff.
The mind control.
But when you look at the science,
candidates.
it makes perfect. Yep. Exactly.
Yep.
And you're just going, yeah, that makes total sense. And if it can be done on so many ways, but of course your perception of reality is all to do with your consciousness. So it's all about that. If you can control the consciousness and make people really fed, it's going to then affect how you behave. And then if that can be manipulated, then it was the whole thing like, oh yeah, we'll do anything. If you're traumatized and you're fearing death, you're willing to pretty much do anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get into that survival mode, and that's kind of where he was angling with the whole lockdown. If you get enough people afraid, then you can impose these things. And you'll say, yes, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I'll do that if that's going to help.
Well, if you get enough people afraid of any situation, we will scream out to have our liberties removed and our freedoms taken away to solve our fear.
Yeah, and that's dangerous.
It's very dangerous.
Yeah, so it just makes you wonder. It just makes you really, and we talk about this all the time, the ability to free think and to do your own research and just come up with your own judgment call on that, and the whole cognitive liberty. And so that's what we always try and promote. Do your own self-analysis and admit when you're wrong, admit when you've made mistakes in terms of your own judgment. But I always struggle with these big global things that just become sometimes too much, these events, because you kind of want to navigate, try and find the truth of it. Yet there's so much inconsistent information, you don't know what to believe.
That's right. So
it's so contradictory all the time. So you're left confused.
Yeah.
Going, hang on, what's really going on? And so...
Well, it's certainly been interesting to watch the media play out one drama after the next, after the next, after the next. That's fascinating. And that's sucking up our attention and our energy. And I think when people find themselves and they sort of dig deep and take time out and they have peace and quiet to sort of breathe and relax and listen to that calm, centered inner voice, that brings us, when they do, that brings us to the next question. Are the people that are alive today on the planet, in fact, about to go through a major global consciousness shift, a kind of an upgrade, if you will? Are we at the precipice of greater awareness? This is some real boom shanker shit. But are the souls that are born now ready to activate into their greatest spiritual versions of themselves and behave differently, only to have other beings on the planet sort of fight against that through drama and control and fear-based assaults on our minds through the media, so that we don't allow ourselves to breathe, relax, and be the best versions of ourselves? And if that is the case, are we watching a kind of a war play out already, where we don't know the effect necessarily, or not necessarily even conscious of that assault on us taking place? If you ever seen the movie They Live, it's available on YouTube for free with Roddy Piper.
That's right. Yeah,
and it's brilliant. It's just brilliant. And I'd highly recommend that if you haven't seen it, you go watch it now for free on YouTube. Yeah. When
did that movie come out? That was a while ago, wasn't it?
So it was a B-grade movie that came out towards the end of Roddy Piper's career, after he was a professional wrestler. And he was known then as Rowdy Roddy Piper. And then he had a film career. But he died not too long after that film from unexpected circumstances.
Really?
Yeah, interesting. And They Live.
Let me guess, a heart attack or something.
I can't recall, and you might want to bring that up. How did Roddy Piper die? But what's a really interesting thing about that story is he runs across, he's playing a guy who's an out-of-work labourer, and he runs across a fellow who is... who helps him out a bit, gets him some labouring work, and he's living homeless in a camp amongst other homeless people. It's sort of a community that's set up, I think, in LA somewhere.
Wow.
And one of the community leaders that help sort of give free food to the people that live in that homeless area actually sort of is sneaking away to do something in a nearby church. And our main character, played by Roddy Piper, sort of catches on to the fact that something's going on in the church. And he goes down and discovers... Oh, and all at the same time, there are these broadcasts that are breaking through the television, where even people in the homeless encampment in the camp they just watch. They're glued to the TV all the time for the news or sports or whatever. And these breakthroughs come through saying they're controlling us. Yeah. They watch our every move, and then it's sorry for that interruption to our normal transition, but these breakthroughs in the transmission keep happening. Yeah. Turns out it's happening from the people in the church. They're broadcasting this, and what they've discovered is they've discovered how to see into another frequency. So you know how David Icke talks
course.
about how we can only
Yes.
see a certain number of frequencies. Well,
Yep.
you've seen the film, and the glasses that they've manufactured that you can put on help you see other people around you. And he starts putting on the glasses, and normal advertisements and magazines and billboards suddenly reveal their true intention.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic, sometimes funny, sort of scary concept, but it was very predictive of the reality that we've begun to live in.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, so it's 1988 American science fiction action horror film. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There were those special sunglasses that basically made you see, or allowed you to see, that the ruling class were actually aliens concealing their appearance and manipulating people to spend money, to consume, to do, to accept the status quo, and all through subliminal messages in mass media. And I've seen those.
That's right. Have you seen people wearing a shirt that says "Obey"?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you know I've seen people wear the cap that says "Obey"? And I don't know where that comes from. I don't know what the trend is, why they wear them, but it's the same font as the word "obey," consume, and these kinds of things that came up on when you wear the glasses in the movie. Obey, consume, marry and have children was what he would see on the signs, on the billboards, when in fact you're just looking at a perfume fragrance ad or something.
Yeah, I mean, and advertising is smart. They've been doing that since the beginning of time because they want you to buy their...
Oh, I was wrong about his death. He obviously lived for quite a while later, because there he is. There's a photo of him on Wikipedia there in 2015. When did he die?
2015, yeah.
He did die in 2015, age 61.
Oh, there we go, cardiac arrest.
Cardiac arrest.
It's always cardiac arrest because apparently they can
make that happen.
They can make that happen, and it makes it seem like it was cardiac arrest, but it wasn't.
Right.
It's the easiest one to mask, apparently.
Oh, jeez Louise.
But yeah, that movie was definitely ahead of its time, but it made you reassess the information that you're consuming.
Yeah.
And really, and it's true, man, when you really start to think about it. I mean, I know I was influenced so much about my idea of success and what that would look like. And then through my career, what I've done in the promotion world and acting and modeling, you just bought into that whole. You became a representation of those things because aspirational, that if you have this product, your life's going to be so much better. But I get that it's all part of the consumer machine, the way it works. And coming back to that sort of question about are we awakening up to the fact, I think a lot of people are. They're seeing it more and more and reevaluating what's important in their life. And it's kind of like, are you feeding the machine, and is the machine just getting too greedy? And does it have too much power and control over everything? And is it ruining the planet? Is it just out of control now that it's gonna basically kill us in one way or another, whether it's through consumerism.
Yeah.
But it's not feeding the right things. It's feeding your soul and your spirit and those things. It's feeding their agenda and their.
Well, if my theory holds any water, that we are on the precipice of change as human beings, and that we may be moving into an awareness or a state of mind that is more spiritually fulfilling, then I believe what that would do is it would free human beings up to live how they want to live. And that's not keeping us under a level of control that the reality I believe we're currently interacting with and have a relationship with wants us to be under. Now, that's a bit of an out there thing to say, I know, but I'm sure there are people who get what I'm saying. So if we expand spiritually in our thinking and we free our ways of approaching things, we treat all others as equals, we don't fear others, and we all feel the same about each other equally and sense with a greater capacity beyond our five senses, then that would make the world a very peaceful, happy place. And that's not going to work for certain entities and powers that want to maintain control. So,
Well said.
when asking the question, are we maybe moving into some kind of dystopian future ruled by tech corporations and technical intelligence, then the answer is that's where they want us to go.
Yeah.
But will we? Or will we fight back with the only weapon that works? Peace, love, and understanding.
Yeah, it's about the more people that become aware of the reality that's playing out and what you said, then the more you can manage. The thing is, you can control what you can control, and you only know what you know. So until you wake up to things, that's with anything in life, whether it's dysfunctional behaviors, things that recurring patterns in relationships or whatever, until you're aware of it, you can't fix it or change it or solve it. So it means diving deep inwardly. It means doing the self-inquiry. It means bringing all the crap up and kind of transforming it and finding the wisdom from it and going, how can I make this better? And that's what you're saying is, the whole personal growth, evolution, shifting to a new state of awareness. And
but that's why we're here, right?
Yeah, that's why we're here, you would think.
One of the best questions I've seen in a long time for our topic list that you wrote, credit to you, was what would our spiritual guides make of our planet's current status?
Yeah.
and I think you've sort of answered the question in a way, because if we're all here for a reason,
if we are,
then as shit as this all might be, it's all happening to in the service and pursuit of evolution. So as shit as this all is, we're all learning from it. We're all facing our demons, our challenges, our weaknesses as part of what's playing out. I believe the relationship we have to the destinies that we have in front of us, which for a lot of us, if you hold a spiritual belief that's anything like the one I have, then it's a path you've chosen and you take responsibility for as being one that you're on. And I subscribe to the idea that the shitty things that happen on purpose for a reason that we are involved with to learn from. So if you take that perspective and it is all shit, what would they think? Well, they think, well, they're in the thick of it. They're doing the best they can.
Yeah. And I mean, further to that, if you come from the point of view that being human is one of the hardest things you could ever do, right? And that you're incarnated on this planet of polarity and contrast. So there's fucking shit happening. There's also amazing stuff happening.
Yeah.
There's just those two polarities, and we're always navigating one spectrum. There's evil, pure evil, and there's pure amazing goodness and love. And it's whatever frequency you're going to put your energy into and whatever you're going to align to. And the more people that can align to the higher frequency, it doesn't matter what ideology or religion or whatever label you put on it, just comes down to what's your energy and where you're putting that energy. Well, how is that influencing your immediate surrounding and therefore the greater impact of the world. So,
and wherever you're at is where you're at, even if you're surrounded by shit and negative vibes. So to use a loose term, negative vibes, you can work within wherever you're at. And make the best of it.
And the human species, it's just you have an infinite capability of expression and creativity, and if you can tap into that, I mean, you just look at this universe, and if you're an expression of that, then you can create and do whatever you want to do if you have the right inclination and passion and stuff. So, and
you are where you're meant to be to learn from this situation, and you also have an infinite amount of strength, and power to pull yourself out of a bad place or to maintain the positive situation you're in. That's all part of the course of that fractal of the universe that you are an expression of.
Wow, that's some deep stuff.
Have a good week, everybody.
Yeah.